Hello. Hi, I'm Helen Gregory. I am the curator here at McIntosh Gallery at Western University in London, Ontario. Let me just reorganize my screen for a moment so that I got all my notes visible. Okay, so I'd like to welcome you all to the panel discussion for Insect as Idea, which is currently installed here at McIntosh. The exhibition is scheduled to run until June 18th, 2022, obviously. I encourage anybody who's living in London or who is in driving distance of London to come to see the show because it really is quite extraordinary. Insect as Idea examines insects within a multi-species framework, considering the role that they play throughout ecological systems. How have we learned from insects in the past, and what do they tell us about the future? If we read insects as bellwethers, or even more poetically, as ideas made manifest, what does their disappearance say about human-Earth relationships? This exhibition puts the work of artists Carl Beam, Christy Belcourt, Catherine Chalmers, Andrea Cooper, Aganetha and Richard Dyck, Jude Griebel, the Institute of Queer Ecology, Jennifer Murphy, and Amy Youngs in conversation with the exquisitely beautiful historical collection of Riker mounts housed in the zoological collections at Western University. So before we begin tonight's discussion, I'd like to acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Arawandran peoples, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. With this, we respect the long-standing relationships that Indigenous nations have to this land, as they are the original caretakers. We acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples, including First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, endure in Canada, and we accept responsibility as a public institution to contribute towards revealing and correcting miseducation, as well as renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through our teaching, research, and community service. So I'd like to welcome and introduce the panelists for tonight's discussion. We have artists Catherine Chalmers, Andrea Cooper, Aganetha Dyck, Jude Griebel, Amy Youngs, and also Dr. Nina Zatani, who is the curator of zoological collections in the Department of Biology here at Western, as well as the co-curator of this exhibition. I will just say that I think that Andrea might be a little bit late because I know that she's stuck in traffic in Toronto, but she will be joining us as soon as possible. Okay. So, sorry, I think I heard. I'm here. Something. Oh, you're there? Oh, yay. Hi, Andrea. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this tonight is because we have so many panelists. I'm going to introduce each speaker with their bio before they present their work so that you don't have to listen to me go through like 9 bios. After the panelists have presented, I'll get the ball rolling. I've got a couple of questions that I've prepared in advance, but we'll also take questions from the audience. So if anybody has questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I'll get to as many of them as we have time for. And I also want to encourage the panelists to ask each other questions, since I know that many of you are meeting for the first time, despite the fact that you all have a lot of overlap in your art practices. So before I invite our panelists to present, I'm going to speak quite briefly about the work in the exhibition that is not being presented on by artists tonight. So although all living artists were invited to speak, not everyone could be with us tonight. And I think it's especially important to acknowledge the work of the Indigenous artists that are included in the show. So we were extremely lucky to include 2 really extraordinary works, which were borrowed from the Indigenous art collection, Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, which is an incredible lending institution. And I'd like to thank the staff there for facilitating that loan. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my own screen. And bear with me, I'm not usually the one who does the screen sharing. So first of all, actually, that's the wrong one. There we go. Start with Carl Beam. And apologies, I think it's possible that his name is cut off there. Carl Beam was born Carl Edward Migwans. He was born in 1943 and he died in 2005. One of Canada's most groundbreaking Indigenous artists, Carl Beam was the first contemporary Indigenous artist to be collected by the National Gallery of Canada. Between 1989 and 1992, the Ojibwe artist created a monumental body of work titled The Columbus Project, raising a variety of issues surrounding the celebration of the 500th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in the Americas. The Columbus Project was exhibited both nationally and internationally. Beam's work has been included in many group exhibitions, including Indigena, Contemporary Canadian Perspectives, which was organized and circulated by the National Gallery of Canada in 1992. In 2000, Beam was inducted into the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts, and in 2005, he was the recipient of the Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts. Carl Beam, a posthumous exhibition of the artist's work, was organized by the National Gallery of Canada in 2011, and it later traveled to the Museum of Anthropology in Vancouver and to the Winnipeg Art Gallery. Carl Beam's Columbus and Bees, which is the image that you see here from his Columbus suite of etchings, is part of the aforementioned Columbus Project, which drew attention to the legacy of Christopher Columbus and the effects of colonization in the Americas, specifically the effects of Native American displacement and genocide. Here, Beam juxtaposes a portrait of Columbus with a group of bees. While Columbus is clearly understood as a symbol of colonialism and oppression, the bees may be interpreted variously as symbols of endeavor and hard work, or as a colonizing force themselves. By placing an image of Columbus in relation to images of the insects, Beam also highlights the European passion for exploration, discovery, and possession, as well as its parallel compulsion for analysis and classification. In the context of this exhibition, we may also consider the relationship between introduced and invasive species and their detrimental effect on native populations. This is one of the other spectacular works that we borrowed from the Indigenous art collection. Christy Belcourt is a Métis visual artist with a deep respect for the traditions and knowledge of her people. The majority of her work explores and celebrates the beauty of the natural world. Author of the books Medicines to Help Us from 2007 and Beadwork from 2010, Belcourt has won recognition for her fine artistry through numerous exhibitions. Her work has been commissioned by the Gabrielle Dumont Institute in Saskatoon, the Nature Conservancy of Canada, the Centre for Traditional Knowledge, and the Canadian Museum of Nature, which are all in Ottawa, and the Indigenous Arts Centre in Gatineau. Her work is held in the permanent collections of the Thunder Bay Art Gallery, the Canadian Museum of History in the First Peoples Hall, and the Indigenous Art Collection, Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, to name but a few. Belcourt is a past recipient of awards from the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, the Chalmers Family Fund, and the Métis Nation of Ontario. She has been studying traditional plants and plant use for many years. Using a style that she has become well known for, Christy Belcourt here references centuries-old Métis beadwork in her paintings. Using dots of paint that mimic tiny beads, she creates a complex image of intertwined plants, birds, strawberries, and insects, illustrating not only the interconnectedness of all living things, but also the importance of protecting that fragile relationship. According to Belcourt, the painting's title, "This Painting is a Mirror," is derived from the idea that it, and I quote, reflects back to the viewer all the beauty that is already within them. We are not separate from anything. We are born connected to the earth with a capacity to love, to be kind, to be generous, to be gentle. Another work that is featured in the exhibition is a 48-minute video by the large and diverse Miami-based collective, the Institute of Queer Ecology. Metamorphosis is divided into 3 parts plus a brief prelude. So episode 1 is called Grub Economics. Episode 2 is called Liquidation in the Pupal Stage. Episode 3 is called Emergence. So ideally, I would show a clip, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to show these 2 still images. The Institute of Queer Ecology is a collaborative organism looking to find and create alternatives. Guided by queer and feminist theory and decolonial thinking, they work to undo dangerously destructive human-centric hierarchies, to look at the critical importance of things happening invisibly, underground and out of sight. They seek to democratize the production and reception of artistic research so that marginalized voices are given the space to tell their own stories, and audiences that have been historically excluded from institutions are invited to participate. They have taken on the guise of an institute as a means of infiltration, mimicking the academic model to support subversive ideas. Their mission is to make space for collectively imagining an equitable multi-species future. With interdisciplinary programming that oscillates between curating exhibitions and directly producing artworks, the Institute of Queer Ecology enacts utopia with a goal towards building a future that prioritizes a biodiverse world. The Institute of Queer Ecology foregrounds the agents of our current environmental crisis, specifically the global industries that profit from the products that they know are toxic, while at the same time enforcing our reliance on them. The video Metamorphosis suggests that capitalism forces us into a kind of perpetual larval stage, an incessant need to consume and accumulate resources in much the same way that a caterpillar rapidly increases its weight 10,000-fold within the first 3 weeks of its life cycle. When a caterpillar enters its cocoon, it releases enzymes that dissolve most of its bodily tissues, liquefying itself in order to be rebuilt. Notably, liquidity also has an economic association, referring to assets made liquid in times of crisis or growth. The organism in the film reconstitutes itself in the specific form of a gynandromorphic swallowtail butterfly, an exceptionally beautiful insect that simultaneously exhibits male and female patterning, evident in this species due to sexual dimorphism. Through CGI rendering, this insect is reanimated from a pinned specimen in the butterfly collection of the University of Florida, bringing into existence a metaphor for a warm, blurry, queer future and poetically speculating on how to realize it in this long form video manifesto. And then finally, before we move on to our invited speakers, I'd like to show this work by Jennifer Murphy, Scarab Butterfly. This is one of 3 works that we have in the show from Jennifer. Jennifer Murphy is a Toronto-based artist working in collage, assemblage, and sculpture, being upcycled and, sculpture using upcycled and reclaimed materials. She examines the interconnectedness of nature and ideas related to ecological mourning through lenses of beauty, chance, transformation, and materiality. Murphy has exhibited both nationally and internationally, including exhibitions at White Columns in New York, the Contemporary Art Gallery in Vancouver, Gallery Consuero in Vienna, the Power Plant in Toronto, MoCA in Los Angeles, Oakville Galleries in Oakville, Gallery 44 in Toronto, and 811 in Toronto. She is the recipient of numerous grants and awards and has been longlisted twice for Canada's prestigious Sobey Art Award. Murphy has been an artist in residence at Banff Center's A Paper Drawing a Mountain thematic residency, and she recently attended the Alternative Art School's Culture of Nature, Animals in Art, led by Mark Dion. She is represented by the Clint Ronish Gallery in Toronto. So each of the works that she has included in this exhibition, Jennifer Murphy delicately stitches together images of all manner of natural history to create new composite constructions that call to mind early scientific visions of the 3 kingdoms, perhaps described by Linnaeus, which are regnum animale, regnum vegetabile, and regnum lepidium. And if anybody else speaks Latin here and I've just massacred that, perhaps just tell me later. Each collage is suspended in its frame like an entomological specimen, and despite references to an earlier period of scientific inquiry, they equally remind us of the current fragile state of the world's ecosystems. These collages reinforce the notion that everything is connected and that we bear a collective responsibility to consider the impact of our actions on the environment. So now I will turn us back to our panelists. And we will start out with Dr. Nina Zatani. And then after Nina has spoken, I'm going to turn it back to the artists. So Dr. Nina Zatani, who, as I have mentioned, is also my co-curator on this exhibition, is a renowned expert on biodiversity and the conservation of nature, with an emphasis on invertebrates and plants. As curator of zoological collections and assistant professor in the Department of Biology at Western University, she teaches and trains students on museum curation and field research. She's been teaching in the classroom and field biology in Central and South America rainforests for over 25 years. As a Smithsonian Journeys expert for the travel program of the Smithsonian Institution, she has traveled around the world lecturing on biodiversity and conservation science. She is passionate about engaging with people of all ages and backgrounds, about the wonders of the living parts of the natural world and how to conserve biodiversity, our most precious resource. So with that, I turn you over to Dr. Nina Zatani.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Not so good at this either. Let me try that again. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, wonderful. Okay, hello everyone. It is so just a pleasure to be here. I am thrilled to be a part of this exhibition and a part of this discussion tonight. And I really look forward to your questions at the end. I'm going to keep my presentation very short, and my presentation is going to be focused on my involvement in the exhibition with the Riker mounts. And you can see in this title slide, the image is a close-up of the Riker mount, the wall of Riker mounts, and so I'm going to keep it just focused on that. And but I would be happy to during the Q&A to answer any questions you have about any aspect of my work or entomology or biodiversity. So let's, okay, there we go. So just quickly acknowledgements. So the image is showing Helen, and standing next to her, Brian Lambert, and in the gallery. So if you haven't seen the show and you're here in London or in the area, hopefully you can get in to see it. This was during the installation. You're seeing just a part of the Riker mount, of the wall of Riker mounts there in the photo. I am a member of the Department of Biology at Western University in the Faculty of Science. And so of course I have to thank the department and the faculty for supporting the collections, and of course the McIntosh Gallery and the entire staff. And Brian, again, pictured there to the right of Helen in particular, for his involvement in making this, his incredible expertise in making this exhibition happen. Mitchell Zimmer, my colleague in biology, who helped with photography, and my students, Natasha Wepler, and all of my student curatorial assistants who are volunteers and who have helped me over the years and are essential in my work. So the Riker Mount exhibition, that's just a small part of this wonderful insect idea exhibition is part of a larger collection, essentially a zoology collection, a zoology museum that we have in the Department of Biology. And so these are just a few images showing the extent of the collection. It is a collection of animal specimens from around the world. And we have the major taxa represented. You can see here are specimens of mammals, and we've got specimens of birds, thousands of specimens of birds and mammals, thousands of insect specimens, thousands of mollusks, and then some other smaller taxa like echinoderms, for example, as well. So just putting the Riker mounts in perspective for you, that they are just a small part of this museum that we have at the Department of Biology that I am the curator of. And this collection has one extinct species. So I'm just giving you a very brief overview, but I want to show the passenger pigeon specimens that we have, Ectopistes migratorius, the female on the left and the male on the right. And I want to just take a moment here just to reflect on why I'm here, why I got involved in the exhibition. And this is one of hundreds of extinct species that have gone extinct in the last several hundred years due to humans, due to actions by humans, various human activities. And we're living in a time of a sixth mass extinction. Biodiversity is in precipitous decline globally. So not just insects, but many different kinds of animals, plants, fungi, and other organisms have gone extinct and or are in serious decline due to various human activities, and principally habitat destruction. So for me, this is why I'm here. I'm here because my passion is teaching people about biodiversity. What is biodiversity? Why does it matter? What is the sixth mass extinction? What is the biodiversity crisis? And what can be done about it? This is one of my photographs from one of my favorite places, the Amazon rainforest in Peru, which is arguably the most biodiverse place on Earth. And again, remembering that it's habitat destruction that is the primary cause right now today. It's the principal driver of biodiversity loss. And so we need to, work together to understand the aspects of habitat destruction and what is causing this crisis that we're in. So this is, for me, again, why I'm here and why I got involved in this exhibition. And so getting back to my work in the zoological collections, these are two Riker mounts that are part of the exhibition. These are two of about 100 Riker mounts that we have in the collection. So on display in Insect as Idea, we have about 65 of the Riker mounts. And this is a collection of specimens that was created, this sub-collection. These Riker mounts were collected approximately in 1920 to 1930. So it's a historical collection. And it was donated to the department, the then Department of Zoology, in 1942. And so we've just been preserving this collection and using it primarily for education, but also for research. So a number of the specimens do have data. So I want to just geek out for a minute and talk about the Lepidoptera. So you can see that in the top left corner, that term Lepidoptera. So that's the technical term for the types of insects that we commonly call moths, but also butterflies. So in these Riker mounts, you can see on the left, mostly what we would call moths, and then on the right, mostly what we would call butterflies. So butterflies are just really day-flying moths. They are a group of moths that evolved to become day-flying and then therefore brightly colored. Most moths, worldwide are more duller in color, and that's because they're nocturnal. And when this lineage evolved to be day-flying, they evolved colors. Colors, of course, are very useful. Animals use them for mate selection. They use them also for defense. And probably for other reasons as well. And so, butterflies are not distinct from moths. Butterflies, again, butterflies are moths. we in entomology, we just refer to them all as leps. So you might hear me say that, leps meaning a member of the Lepidoptera. It could be a moth or it could be a butterfly. So these are, again, two examples. And, you know, the Riker mount on the left is one of my favorites because it's asymmetrical. So the specimens are not arranged in a symmetrical way. If you take a look at it closely, you can see that there's a bit of asymmetry to it, which to me makes it just so much more interesting. These are specimens that were collected in India. So these Lepidopterans are native to parts of India. On the right-hand side, let's see if you can see hopefully my cursor here. So this row right here contains specimens of a species called Tanopalpus Imperialis. That's the scientific name. And this is one of the most rare butterflies in the world. So these butterflies are native to the lower Himalayas. And you can see the female in the center and the males on the left on either side of the female specimen. This is a papilionid or swallowtail butterfly. They are large individuals. They are green, which is unusual in butterflies. There are many, many types of green moths. But within the butterflies, there aren't very many species that evolved the green coloration relative to the rest of the Lepidoptera. So I wanted to just point out an example of some of the rare specimens that we do have in this collection. This is a close-up of another Riker mount, and in this Riker mount, you can see a couple things. This is Tanopalpus Imperialis again. This is the female, and over here's the male looking at the underside of the specimens, but here's a data label. So it's showing you the scientific name that it's a female, but more importantly is the locality where it's collected, Khassia Hills, Assam, India, and the date. So you can see there 26-6, 1924. So the 19 isn't there, it just says 24, but we know, of course, that it was 1924, and you can see other data labels. Here's 1923, 1925. So we do have data for many of these specimens, and that's how we know how old they are. And this kind of documentation, collecting a specimen and then documenting the locality, the specific locality, including, for example, in this data label, the elevation and the date is essential for documenting biodiversity. And this is the value of museum specimens. When we have what we call labeled data, the locality and the date, then that documents that species in place and time. It documents biodiversity, and it is how we know the historic range of species, and then it's how we can learn about, you know, how species have become, you know, overexploited or in decline due to habitat loss by comparing current species occurrences. These are two more of the Riker mounts, again from India, just showing some of the incredible diversity of Lepidoptera. This mount on the left is what I would call a, well, it doesn't have a particular pattern to it that's special in a way, like the one on the right has, you know, has this geometric sort of pattern to it, but again, some asymmetry. But the one on the left is still incredible because each individual species is beautiful unto itself. The colors in the Lepidoptera, and you know, you can see the diversity, right? Insects are the most diverse organisms on Earth, and by looking at this extensive collection, you can get a grasp of that. You can understand that, you know, without having to travel to India, for example. And then, you know, some of the green butterflies, again, some of the green lysinids down here, which are just spectacularly beautiful. And a couple more mounts. We have about 50 mounts from South America and about 50 from India. And then the remaining 100 are from other parts of the world. So Southeast Asia, we've got some from North America, we've got some from temperate Asia, parts of Australia, those are Africa, of course. Those are the main areas where the specimens were collected. A number of specimens of the genus Morpho, which is so appealing to everybody because of the incredible bright blue color of the males. But in this mount, we also have the females. So this would be the female, and this is the male of this species, Morphocyprus, which is now also very rare. And again, down here we have a female. So we don't tend to see these females very often in collections because the males were the ones that were collected because they were so beautiful. The females just have this cryptic coloration. But again, we have some of them in these Riker mounts, making them even more special in that sense, but also having that education component, being able to teach students about things like sexual dimorphism, like different forms in the males and females, which we see in many, different, well, virtually all animal species have some kind of sexual dimorphism. And lastly, I just want to geek out here on the color, because everybody always asks me about color in butterflies. So this is a wing of a morpho butterfly under the microscope. So here's the vein. And what you can see, this is not, this is only like maybe 10 or 20 power, but you can see when you look at any Lepidopteran wing, wing under the microscope, you're going to see these scales, these little structures that are like flattened plates. So you can see them here, and they're referred to as scales when they are actually flattened hairs. And they're just laying one on top of another on top of just a clear membranous wing. So that's a morpho wing. If you look at another butterfly wing that does not have iridescent coloration, this is what you see. So this is, again, an example of a butterfly wing that has pigmented scales. And you can see, again, the scales. So this is what defines a Lepidopteran, are these scales covering the membranous wing. But we've got these two different types of color. We've got the pigmentation which is not iridescent. It doesn't change as you move around. And it's kind of flat in color or matte in color. In this particular specimen right here, there's a single scale of a morpho wing that just happened to be on that specimen. It was just randomly there when I took the photo, and I didn't even notice it until I got it under the microscope. So that's a single scale from a morpho butterfly wing, such as this one. But getting back to this type of color, this is what we call structural or physical color, where the structure of these scales, microscope, so you'd have to have an even higher power microscope to see it. You can't see it in this image, but microscopically there is a structure to the scales that is actually a diffraction grating and actually causes the diffraction of light, which is what causes that iridescence. And we see that in many different kinds of animals, actually. So I think that is the end of my presentation, and I'll just turn it back over to Helen.
Thanks. Thank you, Nina. That was amazing. I honestly did not know that that butterflies were day-evolved moths. It makes perfect sense, but I had no idea. I don't know why I thought they were so different, but thank you. I feel like I've learned something. Okay, next I'm going to turn it over to some of the artists. We're going to start with Katherine Chalmers. So Katherine Chalmers holds a bachelor's degree in engineering from Stanford University and an MFA in painting from the Royal College of Art in London. She has exhibited her work around the world, including MoMA PS1, MASMOCA, Kunsthalle Vienna, Today Art Museum in Beijing, amongst others. Her work has appeared in a variety of publications, including the New York Times, Washington Post, Art News, and Art Forum. She has been featured on PBS, CNN, NPR, and the BBC. 2 books have been published on her work, Food Chain, which came out in 2000, and American Cockroach, 2004. Her video Safari received a jury award for Best Experimental Short at the South by Southwest Film Festival in 2008. In 2010, Chalmers received a Guggenheim Fellowship, and in 2015, she was awarded a Rauschenberg residency. In 2018, she created a course called Art and Environmental Engagement and taught it in spring quarter at Stanford University. Her video Leaf Cutters won Best Environmental Short at the 2018 Natural Film Festival in Wiesbaden, Germany. And in 2019, it won the Gil Omen Art and Science Award at the Ann Arbor Film Festival. Catherine lives in New York City. So over to you, Catherine.
Okay, thank you very much for that nice introduction. It's great to be a part of this exhibition and the panel, and I'm sorry I'm not in Canada to see the show. Try to screen share now. Let's see. Okay. Nearly every winter for 10 years, I filmed, photographed, and followed the fates of more than a dozen colonies of leafcutter ants on the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica. To quote from the late biologist E.O. Wilson, these ants are the most complex social creatures other than humans. They are the charismatic mini-fauna, the Einsteins of the insect world, and the geniuses of chemical communication. Leafcutter ants have eerie parallels to human society, and this is the conceptual basis of my multimedia project. As the principal herbivore of the forest, leafcutter ants are a dominant species, and like us, influence the grand structure of all other biological systems in their habitat. Also like us, they wage brutal wars. One of the principal characteristics humans and ants share is their socialness. And at the heart of a social species is communication. They constantly converse with one another using pheromones, sound, and touch. They are nature's ultimate mobile communication devices. Without central command, millions of ants coordinate their behavior to create and sustain massive societies. With ants, it's always multiple decisions made by multiple minds. Therein lies their power, and perhaps ours as well. The Leafcutters video that is on view focuses on 4 supposedly unique human traits: language, ritual, war, and art. And the narrative themes aim to blur the boundaries between culture and nature. I'll show you some of the related photographs from this project. This piece is titled Colonize the Earth, and it's a 20-foot long photographic scroll of the ants descending a tree at night, carrying pieces of leaves and also letters in their mandibles. The title is in keeping with the ants' ecological power. In many respects, they are the rulers of the forest. Throughout human history, power has been used to impress superiority across peoples, tribes, cultures, and nations. The language of dominance exists in many texts, from ancient history to now, to heighten and enforce divisions between people. The Leafcutter Ant Project borrows that language and uses it as a metaphor for the superior positions humans have assumed towards the natural world today. I could choose from many texts, but I was drawn to the 8th century BC stone tablets from the Neo-Assyrian Empire that are housed in the Met in New York. Across these exquisite relief carvings is a cuneiform text, a standard inscription that repeats with little variation. I have taken words from these tablets and created 10 passages that inform the entire Leafcutter Ant project. We, the chosen, who rule unafraid, builders of greatness, colonize the earth. We roar, no rivals, victory over all. In this installation of Colonize the Earth at the Sun Valley Museum of Art, the scroll is unrolled 11 of its 20 feet. A line of leafcutter ants leafcutter ants harvest from a wide variety of plants. And this gave me latitude in what I could offer them to form the narratives of the work. A line of leafcutter ants carrying bits of leaves looks like an animated green drawing flickering across the dark forest floor. I wanted to convert this parade into a pageant, into a celebration of color, calling to mind a Balinese festival or a pagan rite. Leafcutter ants will harvest flowers, but won't specifically target them unless the source is abundant. I gathered flowers in the forest myself and offered them to a colony. Thousands of ants collected the special offerings and, like a ritualistic procession, carried the cornucopia of color back to their subterranean world and laid the flowers at the feet of a golden idol. This installation is at the Akron Art Museum of the Adoration of the Golden Ant, surrounded by two offering photographs. And this is Portraits of War. The declaration of "We rule" is often a prelude to war. Ant wars are hard to find in the forest. The battles spread out from the defined foraging pathways and are obscured by the leaf litter. In order to film and photograph these mini gladiators, I placed small white sheets around the area they were fighting. During the day, the ants went about their orderly business, cutting leaves, quickly habituating to the new surfaces and ignoring them. But every night, the bellicose colony attacked its neighbor. Leafcutter ants are one of the few species to wage organized warfare against their own kind. They even have different strategies depending on the location and severity of the war. If the battle is close to home, the large soldiers will come out to defend the colony. If the war is far away, the small and mid-sized workers are the main combatants. Although many ants were slaughtered, the two colonies did not fight to the death. 3 weeks into the war, the aggressor called it quits. I observed a striking variation amongst ant colonies in response to the presence of another colony harvesting in the vicinity. Some colonies were tolerant of their neighbors and others were quick to wage war. It seems that even with ants, some are more violent than others. One winter, a large colony harvested a plant I had never seen the ants touch before. It was brightly colored with stripes and spots. The pieces of leaves the ants cut looked like art, looked like tiny abstract expressionist paintings. It was art on parade across the forest floor. Who is to say ants are indifferent to the aesthetics of the leaves they carefully select, cut, and carry home? The next year, when I returned to finish this section of the project called Antworks, the colony that starred in the video had vanished, and the colorful plant was in terrible shape. It had not rained in months, and much of the normally lush rainforest was withered and dry. I searched the forest and found a few healthy plants, and was fortunate to entice another colony to finish the video. Although patience is a primary color on my artist palette, with this project, my work has been subject at every stage, from concept to production, to the vagaries of climate and the collective decision of millions of ants. They may be small, but they are far from simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Those images are really, they're really quite incredible. And it's so, yeah, it's really fascinating to hear you sort of talk about how you've interacted with the insects themselves, especially, you know, the sort of I guess the kind of guiding them to collect things like the more colorful flowers and the idea of doing that as an offering. I found that really quite lovely. So next, we will turn it over to Andrea Cooper. Andrea Cooper is an interdisciplinary artist with a master's degree in visual studies from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Concordia. Cooper's video Honey premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival's Forum Expanded in 2010. Strange Things premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival's Forum Expanded in 2007 and won the National Film Board of Canada's Emerging Filmmaker Video Artist Award at the Toronto Images Festival. Previous group exhibitions include Mimetism at Extra City in Antwerp and Darkness Ascends at the Museum of Contemporary Canadian Art in Toronto. Cooper's video and installation work has been exhibited in galleries across Canada and internationally. Most recently, Starring Part 2 was shown at the Rooms as part of the exhibition Future Possible in 2019 in St. John's. Her live performance, Mammoth, premiered at the Festival of New Dance in St. John's in October 2019. In 2020, she received Canada Council for the Arts Creation Accelerator funding to create Crisis Vision, augmented reality Instagram filters, exploring societal change. In 2020, she received a Canada Council for the Arts Digital Originals to adapt Mammoth. In 2021, she received NL Arts and Canada Council for the Arts Media Arts funding to create the virtual reality and volumetric film in the tablelands of Gros Morne. Her video Gone recently premiered at Video Rencontre Internationale Festival in Toulouse, France. Her work was commissioned by the University of Quebec as part of the Intimé à l'épreuve de numérique project. She lives and works in St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. And I'm very pleased to introduce Andrea Cooper and the work that she presented for this exhibition, which was part of the Crisis Vision augmented reality Instagram filter project. So over to you, Andrea.
Yeah, I thought maybe I'd start off by showing the video. It's only about a minute in length. I made it for all of the videos that we made for Crisis Vision had to be a minute to fit the platform before Reels. So let me share my screen. Can't hear it, can you? Can you hear it? You couldn't hear it, no.
No.
You couldn't. I don't know why, sorry about that. Let me try it again. If not, I'll maybe, oh.
You need me.
Now?
You want me. My lungs vibrate and hum. You just want my service. Go on. Fill yourself up. Global warming has turned your skin into a sweater. You are a womb without
There's a colony
seed.
growing
I
in
dug
my
a
body.
hole and laid 2,000 eggs. Distraught.
Billions of us dropped dead across
disease.
North America.
Disappeared
Left
without
alone.
a trace. I'm the last mother. My lungs vibrate and hum.
We need
Colony
flowers.
grows in my body. They sting.
I'm going to also put that in the chat if people want to watch it, because it was off there, I think, with the sound. But I'll just talk about the piece a little. So a lot of my work has to deals with climate change and also female sexuality. So Wild honey provides a metaphorical exploration of fertility, colony collapse disorder, and climate change. Also, female sexuality. Bees are really a keystone species, and without them, I think everybody knows that ecosystems would collapse and much of life would become extinct. 35% of our food alone depends on pollinating insects like bees. They're vital to our ecosystem. If they're lost, birds and mammals die out too. I'm also interested in the concept of the queen bee, who is extremely promiscuous, but instead of using her promiscuity for evil, it's for good. Queen honeybees indulge in lots of sex with multiple male drones to produce more disease-resistant colonies than their monogamous monarchs. So even though just one male provides all the sperm that a queen needs for the rest of their life, the queen honeybees go out on mating flights and obtain sperm from a dozen or more males. So the queen's behavior at mating time has evolved to encourage such diversity. And so this was an interesting project for me because I had applied to Canada Council as part of a development fund that was with the CBC as well, called the Creation Accelerator. And it was really challenging because, in development, it's not something that you share, but the whole concept of crisis vision was to think about using Instagram filters as art and creating art for the platform. So I invited other artists to collaborate and create their own Spark AR filters. So they had to learn the program and make video art. That was challenging because of learning coding, that sort of thing. And it was a giant experiment. But it was also an opportunity for artists to use, other artists and people to use the filters themselves. And I found that people were using them as storytelling tools for Canadian artists to make video art about the future and to encourage Instagram users and artists to experiment with their filters to create impactful art as a catalyst for social change. As a platform to disrupt the way people are using filters is what I often call, bullshit culture. We see a lot of food porn out there. We see a lot of selfies. So I thought, why can't we make video art using these filters as a way of sharing them and creating art for Instagram? And they were community building tools that empower independent artists to learn new skills and find new ways of making art. So that was the other intention of this, was that, for instance, my Kiki, who's a Newfoundland artist originally, they've been incorporating this way of working into their video art practice. So it was also a way of artists of learning new skills and incorporated it into their existing practice. And the intention was to actually grow the project, but I didn't get the second round of funding. It was a lot of fun and we learned a lot. And, since this, gone from working in augmented reality and now working in virtual reality. So it was quite amazing. I've also, to make this video, I had to create 5 separate Instagram filters. And then the process involved me videotaping myself and saving it to my phone and then downloading it into a video editing program to make the video. So it was a very different way of working, and it came with its own challenges, but also the other artists were working in a similar way to create video art. One of the other challenges is, and it was so nice, Helen, that you guys used a horizontal screen rather than landscape. So it was nice to see it the way that it's supposed to be in the storytelling format. And that's pretty much it about the project and the work. And yeah, I'll put the filters in the chat if people want to use them. You have to use them on your phone, of course.
Thank you, Andrea. I was just thinking as you were talking that, for one thing, as soon as I saw that project, I immediately knew that I wanted to somehow incorporate it into the gallery or into this exhibition specifically. And, we did, in addition to showing the work with a vertical orientation, we've also included the QR codes that you provided so that people can scan the codes and then actually access those filters and create their own Instagram images. But I was also sort of kind of reflecting on the sort of the irony of this work that you've created on a really quite an experimental platform. And then I just sort of took it and I just put it back in the gallery. So hopefully I didn't sort of flatten the concept too much. But.
No, not at all. I think it was really, it was also a way for artists to learn new skills to incorporate in their own practice, and have gone on and shown the works that they created on different platforms in gallery format, etc. So it's great.
I mean, I do happen to think that it works really well with the show. So I'm really excited to have included it. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Aganetha Dyck. Can we just confirm that Aganetha is here? She did have some internet issues. So is Aganetha definitely here?
Yes, she's here. Aganetha is here.
Hi, Aganetha. Okay, great. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce you now that I know that you're definitely here. So Aganetha, who worked with her son. So Aganetha worked with her son Richard for the work that's included in this exhibition. She is an internationally acclaimed Canadian artist known for her sculptural collaborations with live honeybees and her transformation of domestic objects and processes. Oops, I've just lost. I've just lost the notes that I was reading from.
Can I get rid of this?
Nope, it's okay. You just leave them. I also, because I'm the kind of person who over prepares, I have them printed out in front of me. So I'm just gonna like smoothly transition to my notes on paper. Dyck places objects into beehives and allows the insects to build honeycomb on the objects, sometimes over the course of years. She's collaborated with beekeepers and entomologists in making her sculptures and has been featured on The Nature of Things with David Suzuki. In addition to appreciating the beauty of the honeycomb, Dyck is interested in environmental issues, specifically the power of the small and in interspecies communication. Her research asks questions about the ramifications all living beings would experience should honeybees disappear from Earth. Since the late 1970s, her work has been shown in hundreds of solo and group exhibitions across Canada, the United States, England, France, and in the Netherlands, and is held in the collections of numerous major galleries, including the Vancouver Art Gallery, the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and the National Gallery of Canada. She is presently mentoring 10 Saskatchewan artists for the beekeeping season of 21-22 for a project led by Sandy Moore, curator of exhibitions and programming at the Art Gallery of Regina. The Between Us project will involve the 10 artists, 4 beekeepers, and 4 other Saskatchewan-based curators working in collaboration with hundreds of thousands of honeybees. So over to you, Aganetha.
Hi. I have to apologize for Richard because he has to work today, but I'd like to show you some images of the bee work. Deb, can you come here? I have to have help because I'm very bad at computer zooming. So I have to, what I'm going to do is show you images of some of the work the honeybees and I have accomplished. Now, what is the matter here?
So Aganetha, I think you might not have a very stable internet connection. And we'll give you a couple of minutes to see if it comes back up. And if not, we're going to move forward with the next speaker. Okay, so hopefully, hopefully Aganetha is able to join us. Oh, wait, I'm getting messages from Abby saying that Aganetha is back. So we'll just give this a few minutes and we'll see if we can just work it out, and we'll kind of roll with it, because I think at this point we all know that this is just what happens on Zoom. There are always technical glitches, and everybody just has to be super flexible and fluid.
Well, this is impossible there. Yeah. This is where I was, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
On the left, you'll just stay here, Deb, don't go away. Unless on the left is an image of a honeybee in flight. On the right is something I was working on. It's just to show you what it looks like within the hive, not necessarily anything exciting. The next image is a commission I had with the North Dakota Museum of Art, which is the honeybees working for 10 years, 5 years, sorry, on a plexiglass house that the museum gave me to work with the bees. And here's some images of the house close up. And then this image is of a crocheted tablecloth that my grandmother made for me when I was first married. And I remember wondering, because the honeybees feed us and we feed the honeybees. So I decided I would give the table and cloth to the bees. They worked on it for 2 years, and this is very close to them completing the tablecloth. They love the crochet because it's very close to the hexagon pattern that they use. So it wasn't a problem for them. There were 7 hives under this table and cloth. And it's a hive that my husband built. It's 5 feet square and about 4 feet deep. And this is an installation at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, which traveled to several parts of Canada. In the background, you can see a tiny bride's dress, and all around are garments that belong to the guests of this installation that I called the wedding party. I'm showing you a garment that the honeybees embroidered. It was, the garment was sewn by hand using old tenting material that I gave to the bees. And this garment is similar to the one the ones that you see on this slide. I'm going back here. And it was taken in my garden, the image. And for about 9 or 10 years, or seasons, I should say, because I could only work with the bees during July and August of every year, because that's the honey flow season in Manitoba. So this is the glass dress lady in waiting. I had a glass artist create the dress. It's size 7, women's size 7. And it turned out to weigh 300 pounds of honey and wax. And it's now in the collection of the National Gallery of Canada. It contains the bride's shoes, which you can see on your left, and her handbag. And the pearls that she wore are hidden among her dress, among the honeycomb in her dress. These are some of the shoes that the bees and I worked on. And then I had a commission to put sculpture in a pond at St. Norbert Arts and Cultural Center near Winnipeg. So I created these sculptures along with the assistance of the honeybees. And these are some of the sculptures that were in the pond. All sorts of creatures use these sculptures as little homes: frogs, flies, bees, ants, all kinds of birds were perched on them. And here we finally come to the collaboration of Hive Scans with my son, Richard Dyck. He's also an artist, computer-based artist. And what he's doing here, he's got his scanner, and we're looking into a large hive. It's my husband on the left, and I think it's Aganetha in the background, and Richard holding the scanner. So basically, he used the scanner, gave it to me, and I placed it within the hive, and he worked via his computer as the bees were working on items I had put in the hive, and the scanner took an image of the work. These are 3 of the scans. I can't remember if these are the ones that are in the exhibition or not.
2 of them are.
2
of them are in the show.
2 of them are in the show?
Yeah, the left one and the middle one.
Oh, okay. So the middle one has a crocheted basket that the bees are working on within the hive. And when Richard took this image, we're not sure why the light by this bee was illuminated underneath the crochet, but it's a beautiful image of the bee in flight within the hive. And the second one on your right, last one on your right, is the inside of the hive, where I had some drawings. I don't think you can see the drawings, but the drawings are on the left of this last image. And the rest of it is just honey flowing around. We're not sure what exactly happened. Most of the scans that we took were kind of mysteries to us. One thing that happened while these images were being taken was that we also had a tiny microphone within the hive. So we could hear the bees in action, and we heard an incredible moan coming from the hives that was quite loud in our that we could hear them. And the moan was so sad that Rick and I both had tears in our eyes, and we looked at each other and could hardly work after that, because there was such a human kind of moan, as if the hive was totally in pain. But when we took the recording when we went home and listened to the recording, the moan was gone, and we've not been able to find it. But it's an experience of interspecies sound that we'll never forget. I also worked with blind people to see what they would find in my work. And they had a special exhibition at the University of Manitoba. We're the only ones that were allowed to touch the work were the blind people, so they could see. The woman that's touching the shoe is totally blind. Beside her is Dr. Serena Kashevje, one of the professors at the U of M. On your right is one of the shoes that was in the exhibition. And on the right of the shoe is Braille text telling people what they were looking at. And one of the blind people taking the tour said to me, and I'll show you the next slide. She was looking at this work here, which are drawings that the bees have collaborated with my drawings, and they chewed away parts that they didn't like, or if my drawing wasn't successful, they would chew it up. But she looked at one of them and she said, I don't think this one works, she said. And I said, oh, okay. And it was odd because it was the one that I thought didn't work very well, but I put it in the exhibition. And we had a discussion about why it didn't work. And after the exhibition, I removed it because I agreed with her assessment of the work. I'm just going to show you a few slides of figurines. This is of Queen Elizabeth. On your left is a close-up of her portrait, and on the right is an image of her sitting on my balcony. She's about 16 inches tall, and she has the most beautiful, beautiful outfit once the bees completed her outfit. The next image is of Barbie-like dolls that the bees altered. I dunked them in wax, totally immersed them in wax, and then gave them to the honeybees. To your left, you can see how the hair of the so-called Barbie-like doll was swept up when she was dipped in the hot wax. And at the bottom is an image of her feet. This is another figurine that the bees are altering, and I took her out of the hive to have this photo taken. This is Sports Night in Canada. This is somewhere in Quebec. And you can see a helmet and skates and other sports equipment. This is a close-up of a hockey stick, 3 pucks taken from the top. The bees, this is how the bees work. Shoulder pads, sports helmet. And my last slide is important to me because these are feeder boards. They're boards that sit underneath the lid of a beehive, and they're only used in off-season when there isn't any sustenance for the bees, when the flowers have finished blooming, or in spring before they start blooming. Then the beekeeper puts this board on top of the hive, and in the opening, on top of the opening, he puts a several gallon pail of sugar water, so the bees can, from underneath, can sip sustenance to keep them going until the honey flow season starts. And in some of them, I have placed drawings of images that I found outside in the apiary close to the beehives of, unfortunately, bees that have died. And these are some of the bees' parts that I saw looking through a microscope. So I'm open to questions, but as Helen has said, when I finished working with the honeybees, I did ask what ramifications would all living beings experience should the honeybees disappear from Earth. And it's been interesting what people have tried to pollinate plants without the assistance of honeybees. In Japan, they were short of honeybees, so they got people to pollinate trees, fruit trees, one blossom at a time, using tiny little paint-like brushes to pollinate each blossom. It took many people and many days of humans pollinating fruit trees. In California, they tried to pollinate fruit trees by using heavy bats and hitting the base of trees so that the flowers would be pollinated. They've used helicopters to fly close over fruit trees to see if they can pollinate the blossoms. And when I talk about honeybees as being the pollinators that give us from 30 to 50% of our food supply in the world, I also think of butterflies, mosquitoes, birds, black flies, spiders, bumblebees, wind animals, and humans as pollinators. But the research I've done with Dr. Mark Winston and his assistant Heather Hugo and students shows that nothing really beats the honeybees. So I've been very concerned since 1992 when I first met the honeybees, and till about 2015 or 16 when I became allergic to their stings. I get so emotional about the many years I've worked with the bees, because they're so endangered with all our pesticides and insecticides and all the new bugs that are bothering them, the mites. So anyway, I'm going to end my talk because I do get quite emotional about the honeybees. Thank you.
Thank you, Aganetha. Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that you feel quite emotional. Frankly, I mean, I can feel the love that you have for these this other species, just in the language that you use, and I mean, I know that you consistently talk about it as a collaboration, or at least that's the word that is so frequently used when I read about your work. But you know, the words that you are using they're even sort of more intimate. The way you talk about, how the bees love the crochet, or you show that garment and you refer to it as the bees having embroidered it. You know, the level of agency that you're acknowledging from the bees is, I don't know, it feels, it's like a declaration of love. But I was also thinking about, maybe later when we get to sort of the Q&A or the discussion part of this, maybe we could sort of talk a little bit about maybe between you and Catherine's kind of idea of the agency of the insects, because I see that parallel between both of the way that, that parallel between how the two of you have each approached certain of your projects. So now I'm going to move on to introducing Jude Griebel. Merging human forms with those of animals, insects, architecture, and the natural environment, Jude Griebel's sculptures become intricate cosmologies of real and imagined spaces. His crafted forms construct idiosyncratic narratives that explore fantastic understandings of eco-anxiety and speculate on possibilities beyond planetary collapse. Using an elastic sense of anatomy and scale, he visualizes rampant cycles of human consumption and the resulting detriment to both the human self and surrounding world. Griebel's work has been supported by numerous residencies, including Pioneer Works in New York, ISCP in New York, the studios of MASMOCA, North Adams, and HAL 14 Center of Contemporary Art in Leipzig. Recent exhibitions include the Art Gallery of Alberta in Edmonton, Illingworth Kerr Gallery in Calgary, the International Museum of Surgical Science in Chicago, Human Impacts Institute in New York, Gallery Sturm in Nuremberg, and the Spinnery Archive Massive in Leipzig. Griebel is a recipient of grants from the Elizabeth Greenshields Foundation, the Canada Council, and the Alberta Foundation for the Arts. His work is in collections including Arsenal Contemporary Art in Montreal, the Franz Masereel Centrum in Casterly, and the Volpert Foundation in New York. And I apologize if I mispronounced anything, Jude. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I wanted to start by thanking Helen and Nina for including me in this exhibit, and as well to all the other participating artists. It's been really fantastic learning more about your practices and work. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, great. So I'm going to start by providing a bit of a foundation for my sculptural practice, and then touch on a number of past projects that have recently included insects. So in the past years, I've been creating sculptural works in which the body is merged with landscapes, insects, and animal species to speak to human consumption and impact on the surrounding world, and to provide new understandings of eco-anxiety. These works often present dioramic scenes in which instances of hyperactive production, disaster, and resource extraction play out on miniature compromised environments. So there's a high level of material craft to these works. In them, I'm often referencing traditional elements of natural history display, such as models and habitat dioramas that you would see at a traditional natural history museum. So in a way, subverting them to speak to pressing issues concerning ecological collapse and planetary collapse. To create these past works, I've been assembling an archive of articles and images pertaining to ecological disaster, collapse, and species extinction, and sort of working from that to inform these various sculptures over the years. So it was a really heavy, psychologically heavy archive to be spending time in and drawing from and continuing to update on a daily basis. And so I really began feeling the weight of this material at the beginning of the pandemic a few years ago as it hit. And at that point, I decided to shift my focus to explore the idea of new beginnings and reworlding. For instance, what might occur after this inevitable sense of collapse. And so for this work, I began assembling a new archive, looking at past visualizations of new worlds and new beginnings, everything from antique sailing maps to 60s and 70s sci-fi covers. And so I knew I wanted to create this installation that had to do with a sort of reworlding in a way. And at that time, I was working in residence at Pioneer Works in New York throughout the pandemic. And every morning on my walk to the studio, they were sort of supporting the creation of this new work. And every morning on my walk to the studio, I was passing through an industrial area in Brooklyn and seeing a lot of these exterminator businesses with these signs, often depicting cartoonish insects or weed species that were being eradicated. And this really spoke to me in a way because it was this very paved over, developed landscape. And these signs and businesses were promoting the eradication of the last species who could actually flourish in these very developed paved over worlds. So at that point, I began looking at these various species considered nuisance species by the city of Brooklyn, which are also common to many North American cities. And they not only included weeds, but various species such as cockroaches, the spongy moth, and various insect species. And so I wanted to create an installation in which these various insect and weed species were sort of acting as emissaries for a new ecology taking shape. And I was also, in my work, I often merge a lot of fictional narratives that have played an important part in the development of my imagination over the years. So I was looking back again to Roald Dahl's novel, James and the Giant Peach from 1961, in which a group of despondent insects wants to walk away from humanity in search of a new place where they're able to exist. And I was also looking at a lot of early archival imagery of Earth Day parades, because at that time it was also the anniversary, the 30th year anniversary of the first Earth Day. So I was looking at these various processions of youth. This is an archival image of young people in Denver, Colorado. It's young high school students on the first Earth Day. So it's a very, you can see that there's a sense of celebration and joy in terms of practices being turned around, and there's a great sense of hope. So I was going to, working with these insect species, I also wanted to, work in this sense of hope and possibility from these early archival images as well. So here you can see I'm constructing a cockroach in my studio in New York. And I also, during the pandemic, it was a time when I felt like my world had really shrunk in a lot of ways. I was spending all of my time existing between my small apartment and my studio due to various closures. So I really began taking a sort of, creating a hyper focus on what was around me within my personal space. And so for instance, looking at these small bugs, creating observational drawings. This is a cockroach based on a dead cockroach that I found in the basement of my apartment building, which I then blew up and drew and again amplified. I wanted to give these small species, often overlooked by humanity or considered pests, I wanted to give them a more monumental scale. So here you can see images of sculptures developing within my studio space there. And so, yeah, it's a detail of the cockroach. And so putting these sculptures together, I created this parade of these various species sort of walking over the ruins of a collapsed world. And they're all carrying various signs alluding to these Earth Day celebrations and a new sort of world or ecology beginning. The fly, again, is something that I found dead on the windowsill of my studio and sort of blew up, observed, blew up, and drew through a magnifying glass. So a lot of scientific sort of practices being applied, observational practices being applied to these sculptures that are sort of whimsical and fantastic. And there you can see it installed. This is the procession of these sculptures installed in January of this year at the Illingworth Care Gallery in Calgary as part of a two-person exhibition with my colleague Lorraine Sims, titled The Distance Between. So the idea for this installation was that they were parading over the ruins of this collapsed world, but you can see that this very even lighting with focus just on the various species themselves is almost like a light box that you would see inside a natural history museum. I wanted the viewer to almost feel as though they were in a specimen box walking around these species. And so Invited to exhibit in Insect as Idea, I wanted to push these themes further, exploring the role of the insect in popular imagination over the years. Inspired by an essay titled Drawn Before Wonderland by the author S.R. Sachet, I began looking at the work of two specific artists, J.J. Granville, the engraver, and L.M. Budgeon, both of who were creating whimsical illustrations of anthropomorphic bug folk during the Victorian era, at the time of a new and popularized science of entomology. While Granville was a caricaturist, inserting insects into scenes of human folly and politics, Budgeon's drawing, which you can see here, this is her drawing, We Challenge All Nations, from her book, Episodes of Insect Life from 1867. Her drawings were far more observational and sought to inspire a sense of wonder and appreciation for the natural world at that time. And this is an engraving by J.J. Granville of the funeral oration of a silkworm from 1877. So whether the insects in their drawings functioned as political statements or partook in scenes of human whimsy, both artists' goals was to promote a sense of fascination with the insect world that was newly accessible through the lens and looking glass. At a time when mysteries of natural science were intertwined with wonder and unknown possibilities, these small species perpetuate a sense of fantasy within the greater public consciousness. From the ancient Aegean tradition of communing with bees to the modern Disney representation of Pinocchio's sage cricket, the insect world has been thought to foretell coming events beyond human comprehension. And so this is a miniature procession of insects, a sort of small ecocide protest that I created for this exhibition. In an era of hive collapse syndrome, when pesticides create monocultures and global terrestrial insects are in decline, the walking bug folk in my small procession, titled Small Descent, cast a contemporary shadow over the Victorian whimsy that I've been referencing. Now viewed as markers of environmental decline and symbols of salvation as superfoods in starving nations, the small sculptural figures in my installation represent a shift in the understanding of the insect within the popular imagination. And here they are displayed in front of the beautiful Riker mounts. And these Riker mounts provided an amazing backdrop for my miniature procession, connecting it to the similar scale of the specimens, but also to the period in which they were gathered through the references for my work. As you can see, a sense of wonder and ornament reflected within the Riker mounts as well. And it was really important to have my small procession of insects in this piece only standing at about 2 feet high off the gallery floor. So as opposed to the more dramatic enlarged insects in the other installation I shared with you, in this exhibition, the viewer has to really kneel down to read the signs and to view the details on these small insects in the work. And so I'm going to end there, and I'd be happy to take any questions during the question and answer period. Thank you.
Thanks, Jude. Yeah, I just wanted to, again, sort of mention how much I appreciate the sort of kind of the multiplicity of references that always inform your work, from like art history to natural history to popular culture. Yeah, I was really enjoy that kind of richness. And I guess I could just also provide like a little extra context around, you coming into the exhibition, just a little extra. Yeah, because I mean, I was aware of the very large works that you were doing, and we're actually quite a small gallery, and I knew that we couldn't take work of that scale and also be able to include the work that I wanted to include in the show. So Jude very generously proposed this sort of, this miniature proposal, and he sent all of the sort of the source material that informed it. And I think some of you may already know, but while I was working on this exhibition, sort of, I guess, slightly apart from Nina, I was also teaching a course, the curatorial practicum, and my students were were, I guess, kind of shadowing me throughout this. And it was really sort of great to be able to share with them, like, not just the work, but, you know, I guess, the conceptual underpinnings that were going into a work that was being created newly for this exhibition. So, you know, thanks for that. And now I think finally, I believe that our last presenter is Amy Youngs. And Amy is somebody who I'm very pleased to be able to be working with on this project. Amy Youngs creates eco art, interactive sculptures, and digital media works that explore interdependencies between technology, plants, and animals. Her research involves entanglements with the non-human, constructing ecosystems and seeing through the eyes of machines. She has created installations that amplify the sounds of living worms, indoor ecosystems powered by a rocking chair, an interactive museum for live insects, and an augmented reality tour of real nature. Youngs has exhibited her work at venues such as the Te Papa Museum in New Zealand, the Trondheim Electronic Arts Center in Norway, the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, and the public parks in New York City. She has earned an individual artist grant from the Ohio Arts Council and contributed writing to interdisciplinary publications such as Leonardo and the book Robots and Art, and lectured at venues such as the Australian Centre for the Moving Image in Melbourne, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. Youngs holds a BA from San Francisco State University and an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. So over to you, Amy.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy to have you here.
Share my screen here. All right. Are we seeing it? No? Are we not seeing it?
Oh, no, we can see it.
Okay, good. Yay. All right. And so now is the video playing?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to talk about the piece that's in the show called Handshake, and really think about how much we understand that we're entangled with and reliant upon a multi-species world. We know this scientifically. We know that our food, oxygen, and waste processing comes from our non-human kin. These are things we intellectually can know about, but it's super abstract and super easy to ignore when we're getting our food from restaurants and throwing things away in trash bins and not really thinking about what that away is. So in this handshake with composting worms, I wanted to really feel like I was inside the ecosystem that includes worms, people, cameras, internet, and dirt. So a handshake is a ritual of greeting, an acknowledgement of equality, a sealing of an agreement, and a demonstration of respect. So I was holding the worms in my hand, feeling the gentle movement of their fleshy, moist bodies, fed by the waste generated from my own household. So these worms are part of a colony that has been with me for more than 20 years. So we've lived together in California, Chicago, and now Columbus, Ohio. And this living with worms really reminds me of the blurry boundaries between food and waste, dirty and clean, decay and renewal. And it reminds me that my life really isn't possible without the work that they're doing in association with their entangled symbiotic communities. And actually, most of what is happening in soil is invisible to our eyes. So it's teeming with these billions of life forms, too small for us to see. And some of them we can kind of barely see. And I was able to get to know some of them through a sense of touch that was unexpected and actually not very pleasant. I was being bitten by small mites actually while my hand was touching the soil part during this, what was actually a 3-hour performance in this worm bin. And afterwards, I really felt like I noticed these very small mites, which you can kind of see. You might think that they're like pixels moving in the video, but there are these itty bitty little dots that kind of move around, and those would be some of them springtails, others of them are mites, and those mites, turns out they bite. Now I know why the worms avoid them. So this is an ecosystem-based artwork, an earlier piece called Digestive Table. And I'm really making these works to celebrate and share these amazing critters and our entanglements with other people. And I really wanted humans to have embodied relationships with them. So here people can eat with composting worms who live in that fabric bag under the table. And you can feed your leftover waste to the worms and actually watch them on an infrared surveillance camera built into the table. You can harvest this rich compost from the bottom of the bag and feed that to plants. And I really felt like these domestic situations are really important because we're sort of cohabitating with worms and their insect communities. And really it helps to remind us of these nutrient cycling and these invisible laborers and nearly invisible laborers who are really elegantly doing that. Our actual human system is very crude in comparison. Here in the West, we put our waste in landfills, and that creates a huge problem because it's creating methane gas, a really terrible greenhouse gas. So a lot of people think that worm composting is going to smell bad, and you shouldn't have a table of worms in your house, but it actually smells like delicious. It doesn't smell at all really, but if you get really close, it will smell like fresh, delicious soil because worms eat the smelly, they eat the bacteria that causes odors to arise from your decaying food. So you wouldn't know that if you didn't live with worms. So highly recommend living with worms. And these are some objects that are focused on crickets. So I'm going to share a project that I did with crickets, and I did some research about the Tang Dynasty, where the Chinese were keeping crickets as pets. Since then, they still do, and they crafted these amazing special works of art for them. There's like these singing gourds that will amplify the frequencies of cricket chirps to be louder. And then there's little cages that you could wear next to your body to keep them warm so they chirp more. And little sleeping boxes and things. So I really wanted to think about how to share crickets with other people. So I made a museum for insects and invited other people to create artworks for them. And it was really an exercise in helping others take insects seriously. And these are domestic insects, so it's not like I was imprisoning them. This is actually like they live in houses. And it's actually, a little short video here. It's too small for humans to go into. But we can actually kind of visit it in multiple ways. So when it's on display in a gallery, people can see into the front window. And then people who aren't in the gallery can visit it from a website where they can see the crickets. And they can also see the people who are viewing them in the gallery. You can see the artwork. You can also change the music and chirp at the insects using an internet interface. You can hear other people in the environment and the crickets. You can watch people on Cricket TV. You can activate a little robotic sculpture for the insects if you're on the internet audience. And you can also remotely control the security camera, which is located in another part of the gallery. And those are the people who end up on Cricket TV. So there's this kind of way in which I'm trying to think about how do we know insects in other ways? How can we try to get to know them even though we're so different? And also really appreciate who they are, really. And I'm going to zip along here and share just this last project, which is in process. It's a virtual reality project that is all about being a springtail insect. And it's actually not really even an insect, but it has all of these complex and incredible relationships with other soil creatures. And in the VR piece, you get to become the springtail. And I'm super fascinated with them, not just as like characters, but actually as real things. I've been keeping them in little terrariums. And so if you see the video here, you can see these very small, they're like 1 to 2 millimeters in size. They're super small. And now I'm trying to figure out how do I share this insect with other people. The last thing I'm going to show you is this is my little terrarium sitting on my desk here, and then I'm going to try to share my special video. So that on the desk is also my little microscope. It's like a little video microscope where you can watch them. So this is live streaming right now. These are the springtails that live in my worm bin, but I've just isolated them into this small terrarium so you can watch them live, which is kind of amazing, right? Like live crazy insects right here that are so small, you would probably miss them if you saw them in the soil. And I'm just going to stop there because I know we're running long, and we'll let us go into Q&A.
Yeah, I was thinking that, so I mean, I know that I sent out some questions earlier, but they were very, very, very broad. And I know that we could actually talk in response to them all night because some of them are quite big questions. But yes, we are sort of, we are running quite long. It's like about 2 hours at this point. So for all of our audience who stuck with us, you know, yay you, and thank you so much. So I'm gonna ask if anybody does have any questions, because I'd like to open that up to the audience. You know, before I ask any questions, I'd like to give people the chance, but so far, I don't see any questions, although Jill Price says hello to Aganetha. And in the meantime, so I mean, I do have those other questions because they're quite big. I'm actually going to sort of maybe try to come back to something that I picked up on kind of after listening to some of the presentations, and again, sort of thinking about maybe artists, or sorry, insects as artists, insects and creativity, insects as sort of agents of creativity. I don't know if either Catherine or Aganetha would like to talk a bit more about that, or even you, Amy, because I'm thinking about like the crickets there in the museum, and also just how much I love the museum, and was very pleased to see there are, you know, the work of some of my favorite bio artists in the museum. So I'm just going to kind of throw that out there and see if anybody wants to comment further. And I think, Abby, were you going to put us on gallery view?
You're already there.
Oh, are we? Sorry, it doesn't look like that for me. Oh, I've now put myself on gallery view. So no, oh, and also everybody just unmute yourselves so that we can kind of feel a little more conversational. Okay. While you're thinking about the idea of insects and creative agency, I was just going to say that I'm not sure if I told you this already, Amy, but we did have, we attempted to have a little sort of opening reception, and we served worms and dirt dessert. Although Nina pointed out that worms aren't actually insects, so we had to rebrand it, and we called it larvae in dirt. It was actually really, really good. It was like chocolate mousse with sort of a very, very nice chocolate crumble and gummy worms. It was made by like the catering here at Western. It was excellent.
It was excellent.
So sorry I missed that. That sounds amazing.
Oh, and Aganetha, you are still muted.
Got it. There. Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
Ben?
Perfect.
Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, so it looks like we're not actually getting much in the way of questions. So I'm just gonna, so I asked two questions, but I have a question for the artist and I had a question for Nina, but to be honest, they're really basically the same question. So I just wanted to know if any of you would like to talk a little bit about sort of how you see the benefit of maybe these kind of interdisciplinary collaborations between art and science. So like with regards to the artists, like I'm thinking about Catherine's work in Costa Rica, which has involved a sustained observation of a number of ant colonies, Amy's longstanding relationship with the bioart community in general and her work around ecological issues, Aganetha's history of collaborating with beekeepers and entomologists, Jude's interactions with museum collections, and Andrea's interdisciplinary work that harnesses emerging technologies like augmented reality. And then I posed a similar question to Nina. I'm just sort of curious as to how you see, Nina, maybe the sorts of like advantages that come from, you know, these kind of interdisciplinary questions. Ooh, and I do see there is actually a question. Oh, okay. So first of all, I'm going to let you guys respond to that, but then I do see a question in the Q&A box, which I will get to shortly.
Okay, well, I'll just briefly say that I think collaborations are essential. For me, it's fundamentally about education and teaching. And when we live in a time of a global biodiversity crisis, we have to work together to reach everybody, as many people as we can, to, you know, get the facts straight about the crisis and what we can do about it, but, you know, also just to engage people. And, you know, art engages people in a way that science doesn't, and, you know, and vice versa. I mean, science engages people in a way that art doesn't. You know, they're both necessary. You know, science and art are just essential, you know, as educational tools for engaging people about these important, essential issues.
Any artists want to chime in?
I can chime in a little bit. So it's been really important for me to have the opportunity to work with actual science and natural history institutions over the past number of years. I spend a lot of time observing and working from traditional displays as sort of resources for my own sculptural work. And in many cases, I've had the opportunity to exhibit my sculptures amongst these traditional displays in these institutions themselves, which has been very rewarding. And I think that a lot of these natural history displays and models are from a very certain time period in which we understood the world around us in a dated way. And sometimes it takes contemporary art to be able to sort of activate these past understandings and not only bridge time between them and the current age we live in, but also to sort of reflect on these past models and understandings as actual art objects in themselves. We often understand them going to museums as sort of truthful windows into the natural world, but when they're displayed next to art projects, we start seeing a lot of aesthetic decisions that were made along the way that has helped shape our understandings of nature and other species. So I think it can be both valuable for artists and for scientific institutions as well.
Thanks, Jude. Does anybody want to respond to that? Or
I think am I unmuted? I think one of the things that I've come across in working with scientists through all of the different projects that I've done, particularly when I've been raising the species, I've been very much involved with, you know, what they are and how to work with them. And I find that, you know, I think insects oftentimes sit within the the sort of academic community, and that a lot of the scientists are rewarded really mostly by publishing in peer-reviewed journals, and are not really rewarded very much in reaching out to the public, to the lay audience. And insects are so crucial to the environment that they sort of remain hidden behind entomology. And I think that these stories, I think artists working with insects, these stories get out into a larger cultural arena and give something which is so central. I mean, our civilization essentially sits on the 6 legs, 8 legs, whatever, of the insect world. And it's been interesting to see such a huge difference between the different sciences. So when I was working on the ant project and dealing with a lot of entomologists who were myrmecologists who were, dealing with ant species, they're so, particularly with leafcutter ants, because they've been so studied, because they're available and they're you can find them. They're not there are lots of them. And they're pretty siloed into very specific inquiries, which are important. But when I would, interact with them and ask things of them, they, besides E.O. Wilson, and he's a towering, example in the other camp, but besides him, they don't really seem to care. You're not doing science. And I did a presentation at one of the AAAS meetings, and it was really tough to interact with the myrmecologists. And I've been working with bark beetles now out in the Rocky Mountains and Sierra Nevadas, and interacting with scientists who are dealing with bark beetles. Well, the bark beetles are mowing down the forest, and it's an ecological, it's a policy problem, it's a forestry service problem, and so they are hugely open to engaging with an artist to get the ideas out and the messages out, and to engage with the public, because there's environmental policies and there's actions that go along with that little tiny insect. Where, in a sense, working with leafcutter ants in Costa Rica, there is no, larger ecological issue that the Costa Rica government, let's say, is dealing with in terms of leafcutter ants. And so it remains sort of locked into an academic world, where jumping to something like the bark beetles, it has been a completely different experience working with scientists with that, who couldn't be more sort of open to workings and collaborations and sharing information.
Amy, have you had any experiences? I'm thinking a lot about sort of a lot of our mutual friends in the bioart world. I'm thinking maybe about like Marta Jimenez, who has worked with evolutionary biologists. And she's had really quite successful collaborations with them, and she was doing some work around butterflies, actually. But I'm just wondering, Amy, have you worked directly with any scientists?
Yes, but more co-teaching with them. So doing collaborative projects in classes that are art and science classes with a molecular geneticist at Ohio State. So we've been co-teaching on art and science class for like 7 or 8 years. And we make collaborative projects with the students, actually, and based on the science that she's doing at the moment, and like the art that I'm interested in. And then we sort of bring the students into the mix with that. And it's her participation is funded through her grant, and it's funded through the broader impacts part, which is where the scientists are supposed to be sharing their research with the public. And the idea is that we're sharing this research both with these students, but also in these art installations that get produced. Sometimes we make virtual reality things, we try to get it out there in the world. And I also, also thinking about both what Catherine and Jude was saying about these collaborations and the importance of the interlinking, that I just want to say that the emotional part is really important. So I love learning about the science, and then I want to have that be tied to the emotions of loving the insects, and I really want people to love springtails and not want to kill them. If you search springtails on the internet, it's all about those pest supply places trying to sell you chemicals, kill them. You know, it's really very, like, where is the space and culture where we get to love insects? And I think, Jude, you're trying to work on that end as well.
Yeah, I saw that love, especially coming up with Aganetha as well. So actually, the questions are starting to come in. So I'm gonna turn to some questions that are coming in from the audience. So this one is for Nina, and it's from Tom Cull. Nina, it seems to me that the moths/butterflies were originally arranged in the Riker mounts with an eye to aesthetics, symmetry, design, complementary colors, etc. I would have thought a taxonomic scientific approach would feel more objective. So I guess my question is, what do you see as the relationship between science and art here? And also what it means for us to find beauty in the Riker mounts, when what we are looking at are animals in decline, animals whose beauty are part of the reason for their decline. So because of their over collection.
Well, hi, Tom, and thank you for that very challenging question. Excellent question. So there's multiple parts to that question. The Riker mounts, I'm just going to speak from like the standpoint of as the curator today, the Riker mounts, we have them, we own them. So what are we going to do with them? Let's use them. That's my perspective on the zoological collections. Let's use the collections for research. Of course, they're being used for research, but let's also use them for teaching. And so, regardless of why they were made, for what reason they were made, today we can use them for educational purposes. And as I keep saying, I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but for me, my passion is teaching people about the biodiversity crisis. And so, these Riker mounts are just incredible because they are, the on display in the gallery, there's over 600 species of Lepidoptera from around the world. The total collection, we're still counting, but we're up to 1,300 species of Lepidoptera. And that's, for someone to be able to see that, up close in person, seeing butterflies and moths from the Amazon rainforest to the Himalayas to Africa to Southeast Asia, like, it's an incredible experience. And it's a teaching moment when you can realize, like, in a few seconds, how incredibly diverse insects are. If you didn't already know that, which most people don't, the general public is not aware of the incredible diversity of insects around the world. And butterflies, all lepidopterans tend to have they are beautiful to look at. Their shape, just their form, but of course also their color. But even the leps that are just, browns and whites and, beiges are still quite beautiful. So this draws people in, and as, as what Amy was saying, people tend to love lepidopterans. There's no issue really. Like that's been the problem, is they've been over collected because they're so beautiful to look at. So, back into the Victorian era, they people who had money, started collecting them for the most part, from faraway places. And of course, people were always collecting them locally, in their backyard and such, because of their beauty. So, when we talk about insects, it's not true that everyone thinks they're disgusting. I mean, most people do in a general sense, but if you ask a person, is a butterfly disgusting? Most people would say, well, no, it's actually quite beautiful. So anyway, so trying to get, answering your multifaceted question there. I think I may have missed some of the parts. The last bit you were asking, sorry, I'm not sure. Maybe you want to, if there's anything I didn't address, I'd be happy to, but I think I'll just end it there so we can move on to another one.
Okay, so we've got a few more questions here. Ooh, this one is somebody's anonymous, but this question is very intriguing for me because I was thinking the same thing during Catherine's presentation. Could Katherine Chalmers provide more info about the Assyrian cuneiform tablets in the Met that assert human dominance over the natural world? Can I read this text? Also, could Andrea Cooper provide the link to her Instagram video? Thanks. Did you do that? Did you put that in the chat box, Andrea? Okay, so anonymous attendee, the Andrea's video is I think in the chat box.
I can post it again though.
Okay, or you can also maybe post it in the Q&A. I'm not sure if attendees can kind of view the Q&A, but maybe the chat box is the best place for it. But anyway, yeah, back to Catherine.
Well, the tablets aren't about nature at all. It's about the Assyrian Empire having dominance over their neighbors. It was, basically these exquisitely beautiful stone tablets that lined the entrance to this grand palace. The images were half animal, half bird-like, but sort of a hybrid animal human. And then across the center of all of the tablets is this tiny sort of cuneiform text that runs around. And on these incredibly beautiful reliefs, it's basically, we rule, you suck, we conquer all, we're the kings, we're the everything. And so it was just this language of dominance over the other groups in their region that they were at war with and dominating, and we're the rulers of the world. And so it's just this language of superiority from one culture to another. And, you see that throughout history where, one group assumes power over another, whether it's culture militarily or they're taking over territory. So I thought that was sort of an interesting metaphor for our relationship to the animal world today. But the Neo-Assyrians weren't talking about nature, they were talking about their neighbors. You can see the stone tablets, they're scattered all over the place. There's some in the British Museum, there may even be some in the Brooklyn Museum. I think that there's some in Berlin. They're distributed all over. It's just I happen to live in New York.
So I'm just looking at some of these questions and comments. I think Matthias has commented that it's possible that panelists' messages aren't getting through to the audience, in which case, if anybody wants a link to Andrea's video. For one thing, you can actually just Google her and you can find it in her Vimeo account. But also maybe you can just email us or something afterwards. We'll make sure that you can see it. Okay, so I have two more questions in the Q&A box. I'm going to ask the two of them, and then once we're done with that, I think we're going to call it a night because it's been like a long and fantastic night, and I think that I'm really impressed with our attendees who've stuck this out. Okay, so this question is, thanks to all the presenters for an engaging experience. I have a somewhat bizarre question, but given that a number of artists have personified insects through their artwork and clearly have a deep connection to these beings, I wonder how they feel about insects' potential as a nutritious human diet. Any thoughts on eating insects? Insects as protein, insects as superfood?
I love plants too, but I eat them. Yeah, I think chickens are adorable, but we eat things, and I think it's actually an incredible protein source because they don't have to keep their bodies warm, so they don't expend all of this extra energy on heat. So they're actually really quite efficient creatures for producing protein, from my understanding.
We actually have a new business that opened here in London within the last couple of years, which is it's a cricket powder factory. So yeah, we produce local cricket powder. I don't know how I feel about it, but
totally try it.
Yeah, I have a little comment to make about that. You know, it's actually, so there's a name for it, entomophagy. Entomophagy is right, eating insects. It's nothing new. It's actually, humans have been eating insects for thousands of years. And there are many cultures around the world that have been consuming insects as a regular part of their diet for, you know, centuries. And, you know, when I was a grad student, there was, so this was in the mid-1990s, there was out of the University of Wisconsin, there was an entomologist who published the Food Insects newsletter, right? So this is going back over 20 years, and he would include like very, very old recipes that included insects and stories about, you know, different peoples around the world gathering insects for food. And if you read about different cultures around the world, you find that many of them gather insects and eat them. And so there's really nothing, there's nothing new about it. It's just totally, it's a new trend, a new fad in North America, but it's not new around the world to be eating insects at all. It's actually a very ancient practice.
So I guess our last question is, and the person who posed that question says thank you. So this is another one for Nina, and this is also very interesting. Nina, do you think there is a recent incentive to, and I'm not sure if this is graduate or graduate, I think it's graduate. Do you think there is a recent incentive to graduate more old school taxonomists? For decades now, there has been a push towards molecular biology, big data, and applied science only. It feels like taxonomy and the curation of biological collections has been left behind. Hopefully bioart will change that scenario. And that's sort of the comment / question. Yeah,
well, so absolutely. So, I mean, there's been, well, some, you know, it's been written about, yeah, it's a complex question. I'm trying to, you know, I guess I'm hopeful. I mean, taxonomy systematics is, you know, the foundation of evolutionary biology, and it's not going away. And it has certainly become diminished. You're absolutely right. The funding and, you know, the emphasis in biology has become molecular, and there's been an emphasis away from you know, macro or, you know, organismal biology and systematics, but there's still, you know, there's still a core group of scientists around the world who do practice it and who are keeping it going, but it needs more funding. It absolutely needs more funding. And there needs to be a change in you know, the emphasis for sure. I don't know how to make that change. I don't have the answer to, you know, to it, but there are, you know, those of us around who still teach it, and again, you know, it's fundamental. So it's not going to disappear, but yeah, we need to, I guess, work together as a community and start, you know, start teaching some of these subjects again that have fallen out of popularity, I think, because it's essential to understanding the biodiversity crisis. You know, you have to understand systematics to understand biodiversity, global biodiversity, and what it is, which is key to understanding the crisis. So, you know, thank you very much for bringing that up. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's a really important question.
So those are, and he says thank you, those are the last of our questions. So before I wrap it up, and because this is sort of the first time, you know, a lot of you are meeting each other, do any of you have any additional questions that like maybe you'd like to ask each other before we wrap it up? I mean, you don't have to.
I want to just thank the artists just all together. You know, this is my first time doing this type of project, and it's just been like such a fabulous experience. And I just want to thank all of you for for being involved and for being involved in this discussion tonight. Getting to virtually meet you has been wonderful and hear more details about your work. And so yeah, thank you very much.
And I will reiterate that and just say, like, what an absolute pleasure it was for me as sort of the one who was kind of taking charge of the art curating part. Yeah, I'm so pleased that you all agreed to participate in the exhibition, in this panel discussion. You know, obviously I'm a huge fan of all of your work, yeah, it's unfortunate that, you know, most of you won't get to see the show, because I have to say, it is really, really beautiful. And I think that all of the work really interacts incredibly well together, and, you know, speaks so beautifully to, you know, to the Riker mounts as well. And, you know, obviously we'll be sending you installation shots so that at least you can get like that little bit. And Abby's going to be, I think, hopefully doing sort of a digital walkthrough at some point. So, you know, thank you again. I can't express it enough. The sort of the degree to which I appreciate everybody's participation in this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a fan of everybody's work here. It's amazing.
I know, it's all so good.
Yeah. Yay, everybody.
Yeah, yay you. Okay, on that note, I release you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.